give me half the money you were going to bet. Then we'll go out there, I'll kick you in the nuts, and we'll call it a day.
My ding-a-ling, my ding-a-ling.
The voice of the Vikings, Gleeman.
Missed you last week. Understood why you couldn't join trading deadline day.
Yeah.
The trade deadline day.
The Twins were so busy, it turned out.
You still got to be there in case something pops, and we need some deep diving intel. We missed you last week for sure. And just to rewind for a second, now squad's spread out right now, but nevertheless marathon, not sprint. I get it. With no deals being done or anything of the ballyhooed variety, I don't know how much you go steamrolling. I don't know, like what kind of rumors you get or anything. But that day, the trade deadline day, the way it developed for the Twins, did it surprise you at all? And good morning.
Oh, definitely surprised me. Good morning. I didn't think they would be especially like aggressive. I mean, last year they went out and made 2 or 3 pretty big deals. None of them worked out well, but they got aggressive by their standards. Mm-hmm. But I did think they'd try to check, add a reliever, add a right-handed bat for the outfield, 2 things that they've lacked. I think pretty much, going back to the offseason, those were something that, guys like me would list as a need, and they never really addressed it. And even in the days leading up to the deadline, Falvey and other staffers in the front office seemed to kind of agree with that stance, and they were kind of like, well, we're going to try to go after some complementary pieces. And I thought, well, that's easy enough to do. You get a couple of 2-month rentals. Yeah. You trade your number 25 prospect and your number 19 prospect or something like that. You pick a couple guys up for the stretch run. Pretty easy. Instead, nothing. And it did surprise me, although even in the moment, and like you said, now they're hot. Now it's really the case. But even on deadline day, it was like, yeah, you can. I think I criticized them for not making a move, and I think that was right. But also, given the rest of this division, and given that Cleveland sold guys at the deadline,
right?
They're starting shortstop, they're starting DH, and their number 2 or number 3 starter, all sold.
Yeah,
it was
and I would argue at that time Savali was hotter than any of the starters they had.
Yes. And
that blew me away when they traded him.
And they got basically no short-term help. It was all prospect, salary relief. They're always doing that because they have a limited payroll, but. Yep. It's like, well, it's hard to fault the Twins that much when the other 4 teams in the division all chose to get worse at the deadline.
Unbelievable.
So by standing pat, they actually kind of weirdly gained ground, and that's how it's played out. Now, Cleveland has lost a bunch in a row. The Twins are, 6-1, I think, since the deadline.
If you're a Guardians fan or Jensen Lewis or deeply rooted Cleveland Indians, Guardians, whatever fan, and how about this? How about this day or this 24-hour span? What, we traded who? We did what? And then we get no hit.
Right.
And then they get no hit. And then, that's a terrible.
2 days later, or 1 day later.
At least they won the fight against Tim Anderson.
It's true. That was impressive. 1 day later, Josh Naylor strains his oblique.
Oh, that's right.
He's out 6 weeks.
Yep.
And he's like one of only 3 decent bats they have. And now.
Is Bo his younger brother?
Yes.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
There's a third Naylor that just got drafted by the Oakland A's, too.
And Bo's not bad.
Yeah, he's going to be their starting catcher, I think, long term. Mm-hmm. And then I thought Ramirez, like you mentioned, knocks out Tim Anderson. I figured he was going to get an 8 or 10 game suspension. He only got 3 games.
And Anderson got 6, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Man, it's great having you back going through this.
That was one of my favorite fights I've ever seen. You rarely see. I tried to ask, first of all.
They squared up like it was the 20s and the Fosbury, whatever it was called.
He looked like the Notre Dame mascot, like with his hands up. Right. And also, that was, what was that, Saturday night maybe?
Yeah.
Twins were playing at the time, so we're all up in the press box watching that video 1,000 different times, listening to Tom Hamilton's radio call, which he was like, "Did you guys play that?"
Excellent job.
It was amazing. Yep. So then we go down to the clubhouse after, and the Twins hadn't seen it happen, obviously, because they were on the field playing. Every screen in that clubhouse, phones, iPads, TVs, were watching videos, and people were reacting to that, and so that was kind of interesting to see because most baseball quote unquote fights. Nobody really wants to fight.
Anderson left his face wide open to be. What is he doing with the low Fosbury, whatever it's called from the 20s? It's like old school boxing style,
like bare knuckle.
That's what I was looking for.
Yes, he's the one. He literally threw his glove down.
Jake LaMotta. I was thinking Jack LaLanne, but I knew it was the wrong guy.
That's what was that? A fitness guy?
Yeah, Jake LaMotta.
When you're the one who squares up, which Tim Anderson did, and you're the one who throws first. Mm-hmm. Like, he threw the first 2 or 3 shots. He, for some reason, went for the body, which is an interesting approach for a fight that's probably going to last 7 seconds. Mm-hmm. And then I give Jose Ramirez a lot of credit. because he had a pitcher from the White Sox, Michael Kopech, draped on him, like trying to drag him down, and still managed to get off a absolutely spot-on, perfect right hook to the face.
And he knocked him punch drunk.
Just knocked him. And then Anderson tried to get up and walk, and he was like, he was drunk looking. Yeah. And they had to sort of help him off the field.
Yeah.
He almost tripped on the mound.
Yeah.
So he gets 6 games. Jose Ramirez gets 3 games. It's an amazing fight.
Yeah.
But also, like, what a division this is.
You learn a lot about your teammates or your favorite players when legitimate fights take place. And a couple of Wolves examples here is, okay, I'm not surprised if, like, Torian Prince is a really tough guy, okay, and we're away from it.
Because that's how he plays.
Right, but nevertheless, like, if he just has that, let's say, cliche dog in him where something snaps and he's ready to go. Well, when Stifle and Slow-Mo went at it,
that was a good one.
Well, Torian looked at Stifle, and he's basically like, now, okay? He wanted to go, and he was going to knock Rudy out. I was like, hey, look at Torian. Now, remember when Cat attempted to fight Joel Embiid?
Yeah, that was one of those I don't think either of them wanted to really fight.
Under the basket? Well, Joel Embiid, with all due respect, minus 760 in that fight, but it didn't get there.
Yeah.
Jeff Teague came running in as the maddest human being that we've ever seen and wanted to take them all on, and nobody wanted anything.
You learn about
like Jeff Teague, who knew?
Last, or maybe 2 years ago, there was a Twins, not even a fight. I mean, there's so rarely an actual fight in baseball, but the bench is clear, and everybody kind of shoves each other around, and then they walk back. And it happened, and my favorite is when the bullpen realizes, oh no, we got to run out there too, because they got to go like 200 feet.
It took the White Sox bullpen 5 minutes to get to the fight.
But I remember when the Twins, it was either last year or the year before, Trevor McGill, who was the giant 6'7" reliever. I never saw a guy more excited that there was about to be a fight. And we learned afterward, not only is he a monster of a guy, he took like Taekwondo, and he was like, oh, I can fight.
Yeah.
I remember. Do you remember there was a reliever in like the 90s, early 2000s named Kyle Farnsworth, who was
for
like Cubs and Yankees and stuff.
Yeah.
And he hit the opposing pitcher in a National League game, like plunked him. And the opposing pitcher was like, I'm going to fight. And he came out, and Kyle Farnsworth did like a absolute perfect wrestling takedown and then just ground and pound MMA style, bloodied his whole face. And then people were like, wow, that was impressive. And he goes, oh yeah, I'm a 20-year black belt, whatever. So I feel like there are scouting reports that you need in baseball. Does he throw a slider? Does he throw a changeup? And also, could this guy just demolish me in a fist fight?
Wow.
Yes.
Now, all that you mentioned, it doesn't necessarily jump quick twitch like the two where if I'm to think quick twitch, most people would know baseball fighting immortality.
Right.
I would say first and foremost, Nolan Ryan, Robin Ventura. I mean, when he put him in that country headlock,
and he gave him noogies basically,
and just basically kept doing the noogie bit to his head. But it hurt. There's that. But also, did Don Zimmer try to take on Dave Stewart?
No, it was Pedro and Don Zimmer.
Oh,
Pedro knocked him over.
Yeah, and Don Zimmer, who was like 85 at the time, came shuffling after him.
Yeah.
And Pedro just did like a matador sidestep, kind of, like a bull charging at you, and he just like moved. Yeah. And Don Zimmer just kind of stumbled to the ground. And I remember at the time, everyone was like, how dare Pedro toss this 85-year-old man to the ground? And I'm like, if an 85-year-old man wants to fight, he's going to get thrown to the ground.
But he was the weeble that wobbled.
Yes.
But it did fall down.
Yes,
That's what it looked like.
It didn't take much. It was like a, one finger push and he fell.
The maddest I've seen a Major League Baseball player, and I don't think punches were connected. Did Yasiel Puig ever play for the Reds?
No, but he took on the whole
Reds.
Yeah, the whole team. Or no, he was on the Reds and he took on the Pirates or the Cardinals, I want to say.
Well,
and he fought the whole team by himself, basically. It was maybe 5 years ago or something.
But now we fast forward 2-0, 2-1, 2-2, and 2-3, and maybe he had some type of parlay to the Padres against the Athletics in interleague baseball that wasn't going the right way, and he was just taking it out on the entire team.
It's baseball is.
So wait a second, Puig did get in trouble for like some betting bit, right?
I think he's been out of baseball for several years now. I know that, but. Yeah, baseball is funny. I mean, you occasionally see, although the NBA has halted a lot of this compared to like the 90s when I was a kid watching it by saying if you leave the bench, you're getting suspended.
Yes.
So that stops a lot of it. I remember when I used to watch like Knicks Heat, and there was always there was that one fight where you had Jeff Van Gundy was on Alonzo Mourning's leg, basically, like
on
trying
the
to
court.
Yeah, that's sort of been curtailed. Once in a while, you get the malice at the palace type situation.
Well, you can go back 10 years before that, and they liked each other so little. They cared so little about whose agent was saying what, and the money was so much different than it is now. Bill Laimbeer used to, he would
he would like clothesline guys
right. Kurt Rambis, he clothesline. He would get under the skin of everybody and kind of try to lure you into doing something dumb so you got suspended. So I believe it was game 5 of maybe the Eastern Conference Finals, Celtics and Pistons. And the Celtics knew that if they lost game 6, there would be game 7 at home. So I think it was at the end of game 5. Robert Parrish he punched Bill Laimbeer in the face in the middle of the key, and it was a straight, direct shot Laimbeer barely saw coming, and Bill toppled. Chief was, his nickname was suspended. Game 6, came back game 7, and they won.
Right.
And I think the game 7 that they won might have been the DJ stole the ball. DJ stole the ball.
Underneath to,
the Larry Bird thing.
But also, like
that'll never happen now.
When training camp starts, and especially when they start doing like joint practices, which I know you guys have coming up next week or whatever, or late, there's always like weird skirmishes, right? Like it's part of the kind of like getting back into football season. I feel like even with your own teammates a little bit, it's kind of understood like that you got to blow off some steam.
Well,
you got to kind of get into full contact. Because, I feel like every year there's 1 or 2 of those in every football camp.
Yeah. Some of them are bad.
Right.
Like the Patriots in Washington or the Patriots in Houston. They had some really bad ones, like helmets being swung and
once
stuff.
the helmet becomes a weapon, it's a little, it's interesting. Like,
well, Techie, the coaches, like Kevin O'Connell and Kyle Shanahan last year, they will come together on, are we going to do this as what's known as thud, or are we going to have periods with all-out full game hitting? Well, they agreed on the thud approach. So you hit somebody and kind of stand up.
Right.
Well, the Niners, day 2 of the joints, got frustrated with the thud. So they started hitting. Well, then the Vikings started hitting back, and then practice stopped. And then now you got people saying things like, well, you can, get your offensive line to stop this and we'll stop this. And then you got people for purple yelling, you haven't covered our pass in 2 days. Why don't you work so that intent, and it's hot.
Yeah.
So that.
You've been in radio a long time. Have you ever seen a fist fight in a radio studio or in the hallways of a radio? I'm kind of sad to say I never have.
Oh, man.
The day's still young. We could get something going here. But
there were some Chad and Barrero moments very young in my career.
Where would you put who's the minus 150 favorite on that one?
I didn't exactly know where it was going to go, but
I'm picturing
I
that
laid a line.
Yeah.
It was intensified to a point where I'd be like, I got so-and-so minus 130.
I might pick a draw on that one.
It's 110 each way.
Yeah,
it was 110 each way, and honestly, I don't know what it would garner on pay-per-view.
I would pay to see that now.
I'm really happy you're here because of the minutia of things that may not intrigue a lot of people, but they do me. For instance, we begin here. Well, it's at Aaron Gleeman via Twitter. Follow him as 9 to Noon does. The Athletic, theathletic.com. Different strokes, how modern MLB players develop their autographs, is kind of a feature piece that's atop the baseball page now. But the end of last night, all right, so all the Twins do are mash teams. Michael Taylor let a position player strike him out. How does that go over in the clubhouse?
Not great.
Just jokingly, right?
There are definitely guys will keep track of their stats with position. and also they claim
this Luplo.
He's got 2 hits now off position players since he's joined the Twins.
Correct. He's 4 for 6 lifetime. Yeah. As a position player, I understand that, but it's like there were 2 outs, and then Luplo comes to the plate, and you could just tell the See, that's what's interesting. It could be 9-0, eventually 9-3 or whatever, but it's 9-0, and here's the position player. But if you look at the Twins or the players hitting, they're as determined as if it's a postseason game because you don't want to get out against outfielder, infielder guy.
There's no real upside. Like if you rip a double or something, or even a homer against a position player, nobody's going to be impressed. They're like, but if you strike out or even pop up or line out, it's like, oh, you loser.
Was it Castro who nailed one and Torkelson got it?
Yeah, I mean,
that was a nice play by Torkelson.
I forget what the overall ERA was. I remember they did like a study on it last year of position players pitching. And it's like, it's really bad, but it's not like a 15 ERA. It's like a 7 or an 8 ERA, something like that.
Yeah.
And I know Trevor Plouffe, who's been doing some broadcasting now, is very proud of the fact that he is 1 for 1 in his career with a game-winning homer off a position player. And I believe it was
the game-winning homer.
And I believe it was the last, because it was in like the 14th inning. Neither team had pitchers.
Was it against Houston?
I forget what it was, and I think it was the last homer he hit in his entire career because he was like at that point kind of bouncing around after being with the Twins.
That's some techie-like minutia there that we happen to love. All they do is pitch and all they do is hit. So just off the last week, what's standing out to you?
I mean, the lineup's been a lot better. And it's, they've lost Kirilloff now to a shoulder injury. Buxton is back on the IL. Correa, until last night, hadn't really done a whole lot. He had a big game last night, obviously, but it's been the younger guys, Ed Julian, Matt Wallner, and then also I'll give a lot of credit to Ryan Jeffers, who's kind of taken over as the primary catcher.
Maybe I saw this in Dan Hayes' game, or what? Wallner's Forest Lake, right?
Yeah, Forest Lake.
Forest Lake native.
He was Minnesota Baseball Player of the Year coming out of high school.
Okay, but he didn't play collegiately for John Anderson. He went somewhere like a warm weather place.
Yes, Mississippi State.
Right.
He broke all of Brian Dozier's records at Mississippi State.
Really?
And then I'll also give a lot of credit to Max Kepler, who I wrote about being over the hill and a trade candidate for about 3 years in a row.
Yeah.
And a month ago, that looked accurate. And the month since then, he's been one of the best players in the league. Great offensively, tons of power. He leads the team in homers now.
It's marathon, not sprint.
Yeah, that's right. if you're willing to wait 3 years, he'll have a good month. But I give him a lot of credit. He has stepped up, and they've been patient with him, and they definitely need him. And because they're not getting any production from Joey Gallo, who they continue to hang on to.
No. I mean, I'm watching a lot more now the closer we get to it. He bugs. To say he bugs me is probably too, because I don't know him.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't have a lot of fans at this point, I will say.
But there's it seems like he's so easy to pitch to.
Yes. I think aside from the first few weeks of the season when he actually got on a nice run and everyone was optimistic, okay, he's back on track to what he was, which is a 2-time All-Star, 2-time Gold Glover. But he's played 75 games since then, and he's literally hitting 155. He struck out in 47% of his trips to the plate, which I'm a guy who sits here all the time and says strikeouts are overrated. People get too worked up about strikeouts, relatively speaking. But there is a level at which you just cannot produce as a major league hitter.
I laughed. I'm looking at the first question in your mailbag from Scott H.
Yeah.
Could the Twins win the American League Central with a losing record? It's
I was yes.
I know you're right.
They easily could.
But just the reality of it, but go ahead.
I think the Guardians are going to have a very tough time at this point, given where they're at, which I think is 4 or 5 games below 500, and given that they have, I think, the third toughest remaining schedule, whereas the Twins have one of the easier schedules.
It has to be over. I mean, it honestly has to be an 85%er.
I've been covering the Twins a long time, so I'm very hesitant to say that because I don't put anything past the Twins when it comes to disappointing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think as of this morning, they were 90+% on any projection system.
Well,
I think
how about
Cleveland,
the White Sox bit? I mean, I know they were maybe 9, 10, 11 behind or whatever, now 14. But Lynn, Giolito,
they sold everybody.
Berger,
they sold the whole bullpen too, just everybody.
Unbelievable.
I'm very curious to see if anybody but the Twins in Cleveland are even basically trying next year, because I think all three of those other teams, like you just said, the White Sox, they have some good players, but they've sold so many veteran pieces. It's going to be really difficult unless they go and spend a lot in free agency, which they generally really haven't done. It's going to be very difficult for them to reload for 2024, in which case we might be seeing something very similar play out between Twins and Guardians, where it's they're looking at each other saying, do you want this division? Do you want this division? But I really think Cleveland's going to have a hard time just getting to 500. And so if the Twins just, get their stuff together here at all, and take care of business against what is a very easy remaining schedule, get some guys healthy. Royce Lewis is on the comeback trail. They're still hoping to get Alex Kirilloff back in September. this division is absolutely there for the taking. I'm not going to say they've won it because they've blown division leads before, but it's on a silver platter for them, and all they have to do is take it.
I think it would be, honestly, in my quarter century here, it would be one of the most embarrassing division losses that I can ever remember, because you had the lead. It was tenuous. All of this happened. You opened up. Now Ramirez is suspended. It would be ridiculous.
Well, that was my thought about, like we started talking about earlier in the segment about the trade deadline, which is it's fine if you think you have a good enough team that you don't have to add pieces, but man, you better be right. If you don't do anything at the trade deadline and you blow this division lead to a Cleveland team that is all kinds of flawed and is selling guys and is not barely trying, you're going to get a ton of criticism, and I think rightfully so. And the Twins front office basically said at the deadline, we think we got enough to win, and you would hope they're thinking we have enough to actually win a playoff series. That obviously is in doubt because it's been 20 years since that's been the case. But I do think people are, maybe not everyone is aware of the changes to the playoff format, which is if you win the AL Central, no matter what your record is, you could be below 500, you host all 3 games of a best of 3.
The third wild
against
card?
the number 6 seed, the last seed in the American League.
Which is Toronto right now.
Yeah, it'd be Toronto,
maybe
Seattle,
the Mariners,
maybe the Yankees if they can put their stuff together.
Yeah.
Maybe the Red Sox. It's going to be it's going to be the third place team in the East or the third place team in the West. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that the Twins would be favored in that.
That'd be sweet.
But it is the most, like clear path to winning a playoff game that you could ever have, which is you're getting all the games at home. The entire series is at home, best of 3, and you're facing, by definition, the lowest seeded team.
Yep, and we'll get into this more a little later. But like if it is Toronto, it's Gosman, right?
Yeah,
not Gausman. Gosman,
and you're probably going to get Barrios.
They've killed
maybe second
Gosman
game
twice this year.
Yeah, they've had good success against him.
They've had good success against him forever.
Yeah.
And then you got Barrios. I mean, that'd be super sweet. Anyway, Dan Barrero yesterday started his radio show, wondering which 3 would start the home games versus the wild card teams like Toronto. I want to run that by the techie.
EA on the Fan.
Of his hair. Copyright Dan Barrero.
What'd you think of Dallas Keuchel?
It was a throwback to the Gardy era with Nick Blackburn and Carlos Silva and Scott Diamond. These guys they didn't get any strikeouts. It was hard to evaluate. Did this guy pitch well? Did he get help from the defense? He scattered a lot of singles. He got some double plays, but I mean, that was kind of as advertised with Keuchel. He made 6 starts at AAA. The ERA was amazing at AAA, but not a lot of strikeouts, quite a few walks, got a lot of double plays. But that's the recipe. I mean, even when he was winning the Cy Young in, I think, 2015, he was making all-star teams. He threw a little harder. He got a few more strikeouts, but that was the same recipe, which is he's going to work the edges of the zone with that sinker. Now it's 87, 88 instead of 90, 91, but whatever. You're going to put the ball in play. He's just banking on you not being able to put it in play in the air, and he's banking on the defense behind him being able to convert it into outs. Now, they turned a couple double plays. Correa made a couple nice plays on those behind him, who Correa played with him in Houston, obviously. There were a couple squibbers that just the defense had no shot to turn them into outs because they were hit so strangely. But, I think from what they need, which is a guy to take a spot for 2 or 3 starts and then kind of reevaluate the situation to see if Joe Ryan's ready to come back. He certainly did the job. He certainly earned another start. And he seemed, relatively pleased for a guy who hadn't pitched in a year and is 35 and was on the downslope of his career and certainly could have just hung it up. He's made $100 million. He's won a World Series. He's won a Cy Young, but he wanted to make it back. And I think, it it was relatively impressive given where his career had been, but also that stylistic, no strikeouts approach in the year 2023 when every lineup's got 5 or 6 guys that can take you deep. You're walking a real fine line at that point.
I'm reading through your mailbag at The Athletic, theathletic.com.
It'll take you a while. It's a long one.
Yeah, right. And I got down to it. It's underneath the Twins and MLB, written by our techie at Aaron Gleeman via Twitter. And I'm reading, has there been a consistent decline in Duran's velocity since the All-Star break? So I'm reading that a little bit. But it made me think it's like the last time the Twins were diseased, it was that 102 low and inside to Bobby Witt Jr.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, how hard did he hit that ball?
That was StatCast, which is the thing that tracks all velocity and stuff like that. That was the fastest pitch that wasn't in the strike zone ever hit for a home run.
Wow. Ever in the history of baseball?
Well, I mean, they didn't have it since they've been tracking it, but it's a pretty safe bet. No one was throwing 102 in 1950 or whatever. So the idea that he could just turn on that and hit it for a game-winning grand slam is
he's unbelievable.
It's like, yes, you gave up a game, you lost on a grand slam. Yep. Duran did not feel happy about that, obviously.
It's too bad the Royals are diseased because that's like if you're into the now Shohei Ohtani is, what's happening there? But, we're talking late games, the weekdays, stuff like that. It's like, too bad the Royals are diseased because Bobby Witt Jr. is like a polarizing, fun guy with baseball pedigree. I remember when, was Mike his father or Bobby his father?
Yeah, Bobby.
Okay, so Mike's his uncle. When Mike pitched for the California Angels, and he no-hit the Texas Rangers on the final day of the season one year. So I remember Mike. I remember Bobby a little. But Bobby Witt Jr. he's just cool. He's just like, he'd be fun if the team was good,
I think he's an example of what the Royals struggle with, which is they have high picks.
Yeah.
They take he was a top 3 pick. I think they take very talented guys who clearly have a ton of potential and a huge ceiling, but they seem to kind of struggle, over the last 10 years since the World Series, basically, to fully tap in or fully develop all that talent. And you watch him, and there are days when he looks like an MVP candidate, like that series against the Twins. And then there are days where he just swings at sliders in the dirt, and go, well, why isn't he better? And now he's 22 or whatever.
Okay.
But from a developmental standpoint, the problem the Royals have had isn't so much bringing in talented young guys. It's kind of taking that clay and molding it into, fully functional major leaguers who, control the strike zone, play good defense, all that stuff. They have a lot of good athletes. They have a lot of guys with talent, but they don't really convert it into that. And they've been, the 20 years before the World Series win, they were pretty bad. And now the decade since then, they've been pretty bad. And I just, like we were talking about last segment, when you look ahead to next year in the Central, I really don't see them completing the rebuild, let's say, in time to compete next year, in which case it's still going to be kind of Bobby Witt Jr., maybe Salvador Perez, and then a whole lot of question marks.
It's a shame Detroit doesn't have better pitching. Or maybe it can find it, or maybe there are some pipeline bits because you're an elite minor league mind.
No, they've had all their guys have been hurt.
Okay. I was going to be like, maybe they're sitting on 3 who are just going to be awesome next year.
They had a number 1 pick who blew out his arm.
Really?
They had Casey Mize.
Because Torkelson's okay. Baez is okay. Rogers is all right, but he's really good against lefties. They have some interesting players and at the tail end of the game last night, there was nobody there, but they draw pretty well. It's the town cares about it. I don't know, man. The Motor City's always been a cool baseball town. I want to close with this final 3 minutes. You get it all. Barrero started to show yesterday, and joking around, but being serious too, with set the playoff rotation. And then he started talking it out. What 3 pitchers would go boom, boom, boom. And I have an opinion on this, but, I want to hear your 3 if it were to begin right now. Which 3 games won? Game 1's really all that matters, then the next 2.
Sure.
So what do you think?
Well, first of all, I've been doing this 20 years. There's never been a discussion that wasn't, well, game 2, do they have anybody who can start game 2? Now it's like they got 4 guys for 3 spots or 5 guys potentially for 3 spots. I think Joe Ryan is out of that conversation right now because he struggled and now he's hurt.
Yep.
I think you got 4 legitimate guys who could start that. To me, the 2 guys that right now, depending on how they do down the stretch, but that you would pencil in for one of those games are Pablo Lopez and Sonny Gray. from a career standpoint, from a veteranness standpoint.
Okay.
And then that leaves you with Bailey Ober.
Maeda second.
Maeda's been their best pitcher since coming off the IL.
He's a dog.
But here's the one thing I will say about Maeda is, he needs to keep it up over the last 6 weeks because, he's 35. He's coming off Tommy John. There's a durability factor there. But also, I think there's a chance that if they feel comfortable with Bailey Ober being the third guy, who's been pretty consistent all season, they could shift Maeda to a bullpen role for the playoffs, which he did quite a few years for the Dodgers because they had Kershaw and Buehler and guys like that. And so if that's the tiebreaker, if you have 4 guys for 3 spots and you feel like one of those 4 guys could be particularly useful in the bullpen, then that makes the decision for you. But I agree with you. Maeda, since he's made 6 or 7 starts now since coming off the IL,
with his
he's been by far their best starting pitcher.
And movement on 1-2 and 0-2 pitches, or the money pitches. Seriously, does anybody have better movement on their pitches when he's on his game?
He's got, I think he has 58 strikeouts in 44 innings since coming off the IL, and that's a guy who's throwing 91 miles an hour basically. So they're in a good spot. These things, they tend to kind of solve themselves. Yeah. But I do think Ober is certainly deserving of a spot. I also think there's going to be.
I think bump was Lopez Gray Ober.
Okay,
that's not bad.
I could see them doing that. I also think there's some matchup based stuff on there too. They're all righties, so it's not going to be that. But there are some situations where they go, well, does a team hit velocity? Does a team not hit sliders? If a team struggles against off-speed stuff, Maeda is your guy. If you want velocity, Lopez is your guy. So they're in a good spot. This is the best, deepest rotation they've had since the Johan days, basically.
And you're my guy. Great to see you again. Aaron Gleeman, gentleman, scholar, and connoisseur of quality Manischewitz. And for all of that, we love him. Have a good day.
See you, Pia.
We'll be right back.
Watch The Fan.
Entertain me.
Florio already locked and loaded with ProFootballTalk.com. That'll be at about 9:33 a.m. And with Mike, there are just for those of you who are devotees to reading a lot about the National Football League, and around the league. Nordo's like that. I'm like that. A lot of people are like that. Maybe more so many of you from a fantasy football standpoint than the two here. But it's like at ProFootballTalk.com, there's just something new every single day that's unbelievable. Where it's like one of the recent things that I saw was I can't remember when it was, but Ron Rivera, coach of the Commanders, he's fielding complaints from members of the football team that Eric Bieniemy, the new offensive coordinator, is too intense.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like, that's kind of like hiring, who would it be? Somebody who doesn't talk much and they get in there and you're surprised they don't have much to say. They just, it's like, well, you're surprised that Bill Belichick is not over effusive with his praise or his joy. It's Eric's intense. Eric, there are reasons that Eric has sought and been defeated to a certain extent in trying to become a head coach for so many years. And maybe that intensity plays into it. But Rivera, and Bieniemy, Eric, when he was running backs coach here, he was just terrific to watch coach. He was so intense. And he's an elite football mind. But that's like, there are so many things at ProFootballTalk.com that pop up every single 5 minutes. Can't wait to have Michael on tomorrow to chat about many things, including Roots, the Green Bay Packers, potentially will try to beat teams with their offense. I'm starting to think about the division and how other teams are going to try to win games. In fact, the Sultan of Smug starts 9 to noon tomorrow at about 9:03 with that very question. Jordan Love and all the guys, how you going to try to beat people offensively? That's all part of tomorrow. It's a football feast on a Wednesday, and I'm Paul Allen. Thank you very much for listening. Here comes Matt, producer, to put that wrap on the show.
Thanks to Casey's for bringing you the 9 to noon show wraps. Not the content, just the time slot. Casey's, by the way, 89-cent medium fountain and frozen drinks all summer. And you're washing down. You know what you're drinking those for is because you just had a Casey's thin crust pizza. They got that signature thin crust Casey's pizza. And it's Casey's here for good. Back to normal, time no shuffle. Yesterday, nearly started a kerfuffle, strong-arming Abbott into making the switch so we could see the Vikings practice live on the pitch. So rich now in talkers and takes. Preseason depth chart. Ooh, it's high stakes. Man, is there a super sneaky kicker battle? And who the hell's returning punts in Seattle? These are the elite questions we ask. Chilling out in the August sun, we peacefully bask. Meantime, while the host memorizes the names, we kill segments, playing trivia games. Now, this baseball team, they never lose. People are smiling after that trade deadline ruse. Later with the division, we'll say they can't believe that they won it with a record under 500.
I'm a kid.